how can someone be considered the greatest driver in history without even being among the top 5 drivers with the most world titles? And even the best drivers in the world with more championships than him don't hesitate when answering who is the greatest of all time.
This is your 41st win, tying you with Ayrton Senna for second place. Does this record matter to you?
Yes, they mean a lot to me.
Ayrton was clearly one of our sport's true heroes for many reasons.
He is in Brazil and always in my heart. I aspired to be like him when I was young.
He is an incredible driver.
But how good was he really? What made him so exceptional that decades later, he is still remembered as the greatest who ever lived? Was it his rain mastery, qualifying dominance, or pushing beyond technical and human limits? To answer that, let's go over the 10 feats that make Ayrton Senna the greatest in history. And the last one is such a legendary moment that they called it the lap. The race held under heavy rain in Monaco is remembered as one of the most controversial in Formula One history and marked the birth of a legend, Ayrton Senna. During the dry qualifying, Senna could only qualify in 13th place with his Toleman, which was a much inferior car. 2.3 seconds behind the poleman, Alain Prost. It was Ayrton's first street race in his debut season. A huge challenge for any driver, especially with the weather conditions that day. But for Ayrton, it was the perfect opportunity to show his talent. In conditions that took out drivers like Nigel Mansell and forced Niki Lauda and Alain Prost to drive cautiously, Senna seemed to drive as if the track was dry. From 13th position, he moved up to second place, overtaking champions like Keke Rosberg and Niki Lauda. His overtaking of Lauda at the most dangerous part of the circuit was spectacular.
And Senna challenging for second place, and he takes it.
Prost was comfortably leading the race with more than 35 seconds ahead on lap 21. But then, Senna started to close the gap lap after lap, becoming the fastest man on the track, as James Hunt commented.
We are witnessing the arrival of Ayrton Senna as a truly extraordinary talent.
As conditions worsened, Prost radioed to stop the race and signaled marshals that it was too dangerous to continue. Finally, on lap 32, the race director brought out the red flag. At that very moment, Senna overtook Prost and celebrated the victory. But according to the rules, the official positions were determined based on the last lap completed by all drivers. Lap 31. That's why Prost was declared the winner and Senna finished in second place. However, no one doubted that if the race had continued, the victory would have gone to the Brazilian. This decision was very controversial and sparked one of the first controversies between Senna and the organization, a struggle that followed him throughout his career. Ayrton said the following:
Formula One is politics, it's a lot of money.
Although he didn't win, Senna delivered one of the best drives in history. In just his second race, he proved he could compete with anyone, even in a weaker car. And this was just a small demonstration of everything he was going to achieve in the future, especially on the streets of Monaco. Under the storm, when several drivers retired, Senna showed why he was the best in the rain. In just his second race with Lotus, he qualified on pole position, beating giants like Alain Prost, Keke Rosberg, Niki Lauda, and Nelson Piquet, who also drove superior cars. On race day, heavy rains soaked the track and created extreme conditions that would separate the best from the rest. Just like it did in Monaco the previous year, he had a perfect start. He left Prost behind from the start, and by the end of the first lap, he was already leading by 2.5 seconds. In response to this, James Hunt said the following:
It really doesn't matter what the weather looks like. He's a prodigious talent.
The track conditions worsened drastically, and while several drivers suffered incidents and retired from the race, Senna increased his lead with unstoppable control and pace. By lap 10, he was leading by almost 13 seconds, and by lap 20, his gap to second place was 30 seconds. Finally, Ayrton crossed the finish line, having led every lap, lapping all the cars except Michele Alboredo's, who finished in second place more than a minute behind. In just his 17th Formula One race, Senna achieved his first victory in the rain, having dominated from start to finish. This is how his legacy as Master of the Rain began. Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell starred in one of the closest race finishes in Formula One history. Senna achieved his second pole position of the year, beating drivers like Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, Nigel Mansell, and Keke Rosberg, who were driving cars superior to his Lotus. During the race, Nigel Mansell's Williams showed its superiority in pace. First, he overtook Keke Rosberg, and then his teammate Nelson Piquet to move into second position. On lap 39, Mansell snatched the lead from Senna. However, his tire wear worked against him, and 9 laps before the end, Ayrton regained the lead with flawless driving. Because of this, Mansell decided to pit for new tires and returned to the track 20 seconds behind Senna with a much faster pace, chasing a victory that was going to be difficult but not impossible.
He's closing into 5.2 seconds. Mansell cuts 2 seconds off Senna's lead.
Only the Lotuses remained, both reaching the left opening one and finishing next to Senna. Finally, the Brazilian won by just 14 thousandths of a second in one of the closest finishes of all time. Although a few years later, Senna and Mansell had another one of the best finishes ever seen. That year, Ayrton achieved 7 pole positions, more than any other driver, and 3 of them were with the legendary Lotus 98T. This car not only brought Senna crucial moments in his career, but it also symbolizes his skill and determination in Formula One. Today, while many historic cars end up in museums or are restricted to exclusive events, the Lotus 98T remains alive in a unique way. What Ayrton Senna could do with a fast car made no sense, and that became clear in 1988 when he drove for McLaren alongside the 2-time world champion, Alain Prost. That year was the toughest challenge of his career, proving his skill with the best car against one of history's top drivers. In response, Senna answered decisively in qualifying for the Monaco Grand Prix and achieved one of the most impressive laps of his life. His time was so incredible that he was 1.4 seconds ahead of Prost and another 1.2 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. An overwhelming difference. On Sunday, that dominance led to a masterful race. Senna pulled away from Prost and the others from the start, widening his lead each lap. The Brazilian described what he felt like this.
To me, the circuit felt like a tunnel where I just kept going.
For 66 laps, Ayrton dominated the streets of the Principality in a way that no one could match. Even the McLaren boss, Ron Dennis, asked him over the radio to slow down to secure a 1-2 finish for the team. With 11 laps remaining, everything changed. A slight mistake caused him to crash, retire from the race, and hand the victory to Prost. What could have been one of the most memorable victories of his career turned into a tragedy. However, Ayrton used it for deep reflection.
At that moment, I gradually pushed myself and became stronger.
As he said, that moment made him stronger, and he won 6 of the next 8 races, with a streak that led him to one of the most important moments of his life, the 1988 Japanese Grand Prix. Under maximum pressure, Ayrton Senna delivered one of the most epic comebacks in Formula One history, securing his first world title. At the Suzuka circuit, Senna needed to win to become champion and was facing his teammate and main rival, Alain Prost, in a duel that marked the beginning of his reign in the sport. After another incredible qualifying performance, Senna secured pole position. But at the start of the race, everything seemed to fall apart. His McLaren got stuck on the grid, and before reaching the first corner, he had dropped from pole to 14th place.
Senna starts, Prost is fantastic, Senna falls behind.
Meanwhile, Prost took the lead and put himself in position to win the championship. Far from giving up, Senna began a spectacular comeback. By the end of the first lap, he had already gained 6 positions. And by lap 4, he had overtaken 4 more drivers and was in 4th place. In just 5 laps, he was already in 2nd place behind Prost. Then, on lap 14, rain began to fall on some parts of the circuit, and the changing conditions benefited the Brazilian, who began to close the gap lap after lap. On lap 27, as they tried to lap 3 back markers, Senna took advantage of Prost being stuck behind Andrea de Cesaris and overtook him with a precise move. After taking the lead, Senna set consecutive fastest laps and pulled away from his teammate. Finally, he crossed the finish line with a 13-second advantage over Prost. He secured the victory and with it, his first World Championship title.
Ayrton Senna, from Brazil, World Champion.
It was his 8th victory of the season, an impressive record in his first campaign with McLaren. This victory not only crowned him champion, but also immortalized him as one of the greatest comebacks in Formula One. What happened at the 1990 Japanese Grand Prix was one of the most controversial and significant moments in Ayrton Senna's career. But to understand its magnitude, we first have to go back a year to the event that started it all. In 1989, Senna needed to win at Suzuka to keep his hopes of winning the championship alive. Prost, on the other hand, knew that if Senna didn't win, he would become champion. Ayrton secured pole position with an overwhelming advantage of 1.73 seconds over Prost, but things got complicated right from the start. Pole position was on the dirty side of the track, and Prost overtook him before the first corner, took the lead, and built a comfortable advantage. Far from giving up, Senna began to close the gap, even after losing time in a slow pit stop. By lap 40, he caught up to Prost, and 6 laps later tried to overtake him at the last chicane. What happened was historic.
And Senna passes.
Oh my God, this is fantastic!
Prost quit the race, certain he had secured the championship. However, Senna, with the help of the marshals, returned to the track and made a pit stop to repair the front wing. And in just 2 laps, he overtook the leader Alessandro Nannini at the same chicane where he had collided with Prost. It seemed that Senna had achieved an impossible comeback, becoming a 2-time world champion. However, shortly after, the stewards disqualified Senna for cutting the chicane after the crash. Jean-Marie Balestre, president of the International Automobile Sports Federation and Prost's friend, made a decision seen as political and corrupt, shaping the 1989 championship.
Exclude car number 1 of the driver, Ayrton Senna.
The controversy sparked a war between Senna and Balestre. Senna called the decision a manipulation of the championship, and McLaren appealed, arguing the following.
Is that why he's excluded from the Japanese Grand Prix? Where is the consistency?
Despite this, not only was the disqualification upheld, but Senna was punished even more severely.
A 6-month suspension from his license. Such a stupid accident.
Senna described how he felt as follows.
They treated me like a criminal.
Even to the point that he considered leaving Formula One. But he decided to stay. And his revenge came the following year at the same circuit where he fell. But before that, if you think what happened was unfair, subscribe. Now that you have the context, let's go to the most controversial moment in Ayrton Senna's career. The 1990 Japanese Grand Prix. After a year marked by tensions with Prost and Balestre, Senna arrived at Suzuka with the perfect opportunity to get his revenge. Unlike the previous year, this time Senna would be the champion if Prost didn't win. Ayrton got the pole position, but once again he faced the problem of starting on the dirty side of the track. After multiple complaints, the stewards agreed to move the pole to the clean side, but Balestre intervened and rejected the decision. Senna saw this as a deliberate attempt to favor Prost once again, and before the race, he made his approach clear.
I was screwed over by the system many times. I told myself, today won't be like that. It has to go my way.
At the start, Prost got off better and took the lead. But when they reached the first corner, Senna took the inside line, just like the previous year. In Suzuka, Ayrton not only became a 2-time world champion, but also followed one of the most controversial and legendary chapters in the history of Formula One. However, this was not the last encounter between Senna and Prost. Ayrton Senna had an outstanding debt with his country, winning at home, a victory that had eluded him so many times, and that day finally seemed within his reach. Starting from pole position, Ayrton had a perfect start, led the race from the beginning, and everything indicated it would be an easy victory, but as was usual in Brazil, nothing would be easy. The rain started to fall, and with it came mechanical problems. First, Senna lost 4th gear, which made his pace more complicated. By lap 60, his lead had decreased drastically, while Ricardo Petrues, who was in 2nd place, was setting fast laps and closing in dangerously. Then the situation became critical. Senna also lost 3rd and 5th gear and got stuck in 6th. So, on a circuit full of slow and medium corners, driving like that was almost impossible. The car almost stalled several times, but with superhuman determination, Senna kept going and crossed the finish line in first place with just a 2.9-second lead. The moment that followed was unforgettable. Senna's joyful screams echoed throughout Interlagos. He had not only fulfilled his dream of winning at home, but he had done it under conditions that pushed human limits. Senna was completely exhausted. Driving so many laps in sixth gear gave him cramps and muscle spasms in his shoulders and neck, leaving him motionless in his car. He could barely move and had to be assisted to reach the podium in the medical car. Once on the podium, Ayrton, visibly in pain, raised the Brazilian flag with a titanic effort. The tears in his eyes reflected a mix of pain, relief, and pride. He could barely lift the trophy, but that gesture was immortalized as one of the most heroic and emotional moments in the history of Formula One. That was his first win in Brazil, accomplished under nearly impossible conditions. That victory inspired all of Brazil and made Ayrton Senna a national hero.
Senna, Senna. Ole, ole, ole. Senna, Senna.
That day, Ayrton transcended sports and cemented his place as an eternal icon. Later that season, Senna secured his third world title in Japan, in what was the fourth consecutive championship decider at Suzuka. Monaco, a circuit where overtaking is almost impossible, was the stage for one of Ayrton Senna's greatest feats. In 1992, Nigel Mansell's Williams was practically unbeatable. A car controlled by computerized systems that gave him an overwhelming technical advantage. Heading into the weekend, Senna knew his chances were minimal, since Mansell had dominated the first 5 races of the season with total authority. In qualifying, the Williams cars reaffirmed their superiority, with Mansell and Prost taking the front row. Senna took third place and overtook Prost at the race start with a perfect move. From the start, Mansell proved his car's dominance, pulling away by a second per lap. It seemed like a guaranteed victory until everything changed on lap 70. A problem forced Mansell to pit, costing him the lead and putting him behind Senna. Ayrton's advantage seemed unsustainable because with new tires, Mansell was setting impressive laps and reduced the gap from 5.2 seconds to just 1.9 in only 2 laps. In the last 3 laps, Mansell tried everything, pushed with unmatched intensity, and looked for any opportunity to overtake. But Senna showed masterful defense and positioned his McLaren in exactly the right places to block the channel. Achieved against all odds and in a clearly inferior car. With this victory, Ayrton achieved his 5th win on the streets of the Principality, matching the record of Graham Hill, which he broke a year later, in 1993 with his 6th victory, making him the King of Monaco. Once again, Senna had the opportunity to shine in his homeland, but he faced the unbeatable Williams during one of the most technology-dominated seasons. In qualifying, the gap between Senna's McLaren and the Williams cars became clear. Alain Prost and Damon Hill took the front row, with Prost almost 2 seconds faster than Ayrton, who qualified third. However, in the first corner, Senna overtook Hill and moved up to second behind Prost. From there, the Frenchman began to build a comfortable lead while Senna tried to keep Hill at bay. However, on lap 11, Hill regained the position, and then everything got worse. On lap 25, Senna received a stop-and-go penalty for overtaking a backmarker under yellow flags, and it seemed that the day would end in frustration for the Brazilian. However, as so many times before, the weather changed the fate of the race. Halfway through the competition, the rain began to fall, making conditions more difficult for everyone. Several drivers lost control, including Prost, who collided with Christian Fittipaldi on lap 29, which left Hill in the lead and Senna in second place. Ayrton took advantage of his mastery in wet conditions, closed the gap with Hill, and on lap 42, overtook him to take the lead. But in a race with an oil pressure warning, it set off alarms in his McLaren. With the car at its limit, Ayrton fought until the end and crossed the finish line in first place, but just 50 meters later his car stopped. The moment was unforgettable. Senna won his second race at home and achieved McLaren's 100th victory in an event full of emotion for the Brazilian crowd, who cheered him like a hero. With an inferior car, a penalty, and changing conditions, Senna reaffirmed why he was considered the greatest of all time. Despite his amazing achievement in Brazil, his next race featured a performance that changed Formula One history forever. But before that, if you've made it to the end, you've enjoyed this video, so subscribe. Ayrton Senna drove one of the best laps in history during the 1993 European Grand Prix. The Brazilian qualified fourth on a grid led by the Williams Renaults, 1.6 seconds behind pole sitter Alain Prost. Although it was known that rainy conditions favored Ayrton, no one could have imagined what was about to happen. Senna had a poor start and briefly dropped to 5th place after being overtaken by Michael Schumacher's Benetton at the first corner. On the way out of Red Gate, he regained the lost position when he overtook Schumacher. He overtook Karl Wendlinger on the outside of the Craner curves with a masterful move. At McLaren's corner, he passed Damon Hill and put his McLaren in 2nd place. Finally, in the penultimate corner, the Melbourne hairpin, Senna overtook Prost to take the lead of the race. By the start of the 2nd lap, Senna was already leading the race, and in just 4 laps, he built a 7-second advantage over Prost. Additionally, the race conditions were chaotic. The rain kept coming and going, which forced the drivers to make multiple pit stops to change tires. But nothing seemed to stop Senna. His ability to adapt to every change kept him untouchable in 1st place. The victory was overwhelming. Senna lapped every driver except Hill and finished with a display of absolute mastery under impossible conditions. That was his 38th victory in Formula One and one of the most impressive in his career. Furthermore, the first lap was immortalized as a scar and was named the Lap of the Gods. The following year, after a very frustrating start to the season due to the car's instability, Imola arrived. With an enormous effort, Senna secured pole position, however. During the race, he crashed at the Tamburello corner and lost his life. Unfortunately, we couldn't see more of his career, since due to a crash that didn't seem so severe, his life came to an end. However, after his accident, there was a complete review of safety regulations. And even though there were several more chilling crashes, like the ones you can see in this video, none had the same fate as the Brazilian legend. We will remember you forever, Ayrton.